Today's topic is controversial tracks on the Formula One calendar and whether the sport should keep them there. As you probably know, F1 is famous for racing at tracks in countries that are not precisely perfect places where you'd want to live. So this is probably going to be more of a serious video. F1 recently announced their new 24 race calendar for 2023. We've seen some old names return, some disappear, and some new ones. For the first time since its reintroduction in 2018, we finally dropped the French Grand Prix, following the many critiques it received over the years for its lame races, a circuit with no personality and no characteristic corners, and for the fact that because it lacks gravel and sand traps, safety cars, which mix up the racing, getting all the drivers back together, are more than a rare occurrence. The new name this upcoming season is the Las Vegas Grand Prix, a street course that holds a night race in Las Vegas, Nevada, and it will surely be a Grand Prix we won't want to miss out on, since seeing cars zooming around the city centre is not something we're used to seeing. Furthermore, many controversies already surround this race, even though we're still more than a year away from its first edition. Like the fact that big hotels bought most of the tickets to then only resell them together with bedrooms. And some of the grandstands which hold the fans are going to be positioned right in front of the hotels, meaning less visibility for the structure and less free advertisement. So we are sure that someone along the way is going to protest this. Other names we weren't expected back on the Formula One calendar are the Chinese Grand Prix, held from 2004 to 2019. The last race here was before the COVID-19 pandemic, and the Qatar Grand Prix, one of the 4 races to be held in a Mid-East country. Behind this one, the controversies get a little obscure. The Qatar Grand Prix was only held one time in 2021. When F1 was still looking for circuits to race at since the pandemic was still raging and there weren't many countries accepting visitors, even for sports reasons. The racing there is pretty good, even though the track was designed for bike races. The DRS zone was so long that drivers always overtook on the straights. Still, despite all this, last time F1 went back there, we saw the return of Fernando Alonso on the podium. So another race with this kind of mixed top field there would be pretty entertaining. The Grand Prix wasn't on the calendar this season since the country also hosts the Football World Cup. The government decided to focus on just one thing at a time, but it's coming back next year, and oh boy did we get some drama about this. The first problems were raised in 2021 by Amnesty International, an NGO working to protect human rights, when its members got the news that Formula One would be racing there, saying that the conditions workers are treated within this country are unacceptable and that the sport should end its contract with the track immediately, going as far to send an appeal to Lewis Hamilton himself, who we all know and love as the Protest for Human Rights man. In an interview that year, he stated, "We're aware that there are issues in these places that we're going to," he said. But of course, it seems to be one of the worst in this part of the world. As sports go to these places, they are duty-bound to raise awareness for these issues. These places need scrutiny. Equal rights is a serious issue. What he meant was that even though he is and will be doing all he can to raise awareness in these countries, there's nothing more that he can do since he's an athlete and he has a contract. He must race in these countries, willingly or not, as it's part of his job. Of course, this isn't the first time these kinds of things have happened. Amnesty International again called out F1 for making a deal with Saudi Arabia to race there at least until 2030. Things were starting to get a little heated this year, even between the drivers. A missile hit the Aramco oil depot Friday night before the 2022 race in Jeddah. All drivers and team principals were called to attend an emergency meeting. Some drivers were even thinking of boycotting the race for all the terrible things happening in the country then. Many fans at home also willingly decided that they would not watch the race on TV as signs of a protest against the terrible places F1 has been racing at. Luckily for the championship, the race was started anyways. But rest assured, we will see some other controversies like this at this circuit in the future. Another hot topic when the new F1 calendar was released was the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Many fans on Twitter stating that if the Russian Grand Prix was cancelled following we all know what, Formula One should be returning to the streets of Baku next year. Azerbaijan in fact recently started a conflict against the neighbouring country of Armenia, so these fans are trying to say that every racetrack should be treated equally and that since the Russian Grand Prix was cancelled, then the Azerbaijan Grand Prix should be cancelled as well. Of course, it's not just in recent times that these kinds of discussions have popped up. Back a few years ago in 2011, the Bahrain Grand Prix was cancelled due to fans protesting against it after the country suffered a terrible human rights crisis. Many fans hoped that the championship would not come back there anytime soon. Still, it did in 2012, sparking even more protests while news agencies hoped the teams would boycott the race. We already said that many F1 fans, especially hardcore ones that have been here for such a long time, know what's happening where Formula 1 races and are against these Grand Prix and would like them to be cancelled. But let's take a step back. Some fans, especially newer ones who just want to watch the races, not caring about the countries they race in, have a policy that states that politics should always remain out of the sport. They think that since this is a sport, it should have the right to race wherever its directors believe it's best, not caring about what happens outside of the racetrack. In contrast, others believe that since they are advertising the tracks they race at, they should be more responsible with their track choices and with what places they advise fans to watch the race at. What do you think about all the countries F1 races at? Do you believe it should end its contract with those kind of tracks? Let us know with a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe, because at 10,000 subscribers, we will create our own F1 tracks so the sport can have a racetrack everyone enjoys. No, not really, but you should subscribe anyway.